Hello and welcome to Digital Talk Podcast, the podcast where we share stories with the wider community of how digital technology and telecoms can do good. Join me, Ian Ginn.
And me, Frankie Spagnolo, on our Discovery series, as we talk to our guests and find out about themselves, what motivates them, and help celebrate their projects and achievements.
Today, we are delighted to be joined by Shaun Collins, the founder of analyst and advisory firm CCS Insight and head judge of the GSMA GloMo Awards. In this episode, we'll discover more about him, his background, and hear about what he enjoys when he's not at work. Welcome, Shaun. Thank you for joining our podcast.
Pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me.
So can you maybe, just as an introduction, just say a little bit more about your professional background and what you're doing now, really?
Yeah, great. So I'm quite old. I'm 61 years old. And so I've been absolutely thrilled to be a part of this industry, the connected industry, and more specifically the mobile industry, since 1988, when I started work at Motorola in their European, as they called it then, cellular subscriber division in Basingstoke in the southeast of England. And I basically answered a job application in the newspaper. For the youngsters out there, that's something in black and white you get on newsstands. And, and I went to work for them, having seen a friend of mine pull up in a car that had a car phone and think, this is a really, really good idea. And then Motorola, who were market leaders at the time, the job came up. I got the job and started work for them. I worked at Motorola for front to back about 6 years. In the middle of that, Motorola very kindly paid for me to go off for a year and do an MBA, which I was keen to do. And as long as, of course, I came back and spent some time with them. And I did that. And that coincided with the move from old analog systems, the old ETACs and AMPs and NMT and the various fairly disparate systems that were going on around the world in terms of analog technology, and the innovation that happened around in the early 1990s about GSM. And of course, it'd be silly not to say CDMA as well at the time, with our friends in North America who were seeking to take some ownership of what the digital technology might look like. And after 6 years, I decided that I wanted to set my own business up because I felt there was a burgeoning business in there. And I set up a company which is called, to this day, is called CCS Insight. And actually, Motorola became my second customer because they were very supportive in those days. And that's where we are still today, 30 years later.
And I understand you're the chairman from the
I am indeed. So now I started off basically as a one-man band, as we would do in those days. And I built the business up alongside a very, very important group of men and women who, frankly, I absolutely couldn't have done this without. And we'll probably talk about those a bit later. To the business now, which I think is one of the most widely respected of the analysts' houses around. We have an office in King's Cross in London, and we are just about to move our office down to San Diego, actually, in California, away from San Jose. But that's because people are moving rather than the business is moving, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. And we want to make sure that the people are centered in the office. And I moved to being chairman about 2 years ago and appointed one of our guys who actually came back from running the US organization 3 years ago, I think I'm right to say.
Fantastic. I think it's well done, and that's a long journey. I was looking at your background, as you say, and I thought, wow, he started this organization. Congratulations. So hat off from my side to you on that. So do you have a philosophy in life that you live by?
That's a good question. I think, do I have a philosophy in life? I think other than the things I believe are do right unto others as you would do unto yourself, if you know what I mean. We have a few things which we have as kind of golden rules in the business, which I think culture always comes from the top, right? It's always about the leadership at the top, whoever they are, whoever he or she is, or whoever the team is at the top. We do a few things. And I think in the business in which we are in, there are some things I think which compound into a philosophy which we seek to you might call them values, you might call them ideas. I don't know what you'd want to call them. I think we live the technology. We're living the dream, really, in many occasions. I mean, I think that I'm so excited, even now, every day, to think about what's going on in this technology. I'm never bored. I've been in this industry now for the thick end of 35 years. And I've never, ever been bored. Not once. I might have been a little bit depressed or a little bit excited, but I've never been bored. It's a fantastic industry to be in. I think I try to be thought leaders. So think around what can come, what's coming along, how we can manage our business now to get to those points. The other thing is, we stay till the job's done. I'm very keen on everybody to being accountable for what they're doing. So I think that, that's a really important part of what we do. And then the last thing, I guess, of all of those things is that we respect both one another and our customers in terms of both a few things around delivery and response, but most importantly around confidentiality and support. I always say to our guys, our men and women, be good to one another, because this is a hard life sometimes. We ask people sometimes to step above and beyond. We don't ask them to do it a lot, but we ask them to do it reasonably often. And I think that nobody ever says no. And I'm always very moved by that, but also the fact that they're also buying into these set of values and a culture that I think that is the philosophy that perhaps I started out with to deliver that first set of pieces of research around them.
Yeah, well, that's great.
I loved much of what you just said. Culture comes from the top, and those values and golden rules and being thought leaders. And it's really incredible to have built something like you have done. And is Motorola still a client? Are you working with both Motorola and GSMA for over 3 decades?
We have some customers we've worked with for the longest one would be maybe 20 years in various ways. So Motorola is still a customer, but not in the way it was, of course, because it's gone through the parts we worked for have gone through so many different organizations and transfer and so forth. So Motorola is still a customer of ours for one-off pieces of work, but not in the way that many others are. Our business is almost exclusively retained on a yearly or a 2 or a 3 or a 4 year deals.
Right.
And we deliver that information into our customers over that period of time. Yeah. And we have customers that we've had for 20 years, I think, certainly. And certainly we have many, and I'm talking about big blue chip names now, that we've had for certainly between 10 and 20 years. And then, we're still trying to get there are still ones we want and don't have. And if I challenge the sales guys about it, or the salespeople about it, I should say, and say, why aren't we dealing with them? Nobody's got a really good answer. I think we just haven't done the right job in the right place at the right time yet. So there's lots of things we still need to do, but some of those big names, and all the names you could name would be in there, both here and in the United States and in the Far East, I think would be part of our customer portfolio and roster.
Well, I think that long-term planning is important when you're really providing consultative analysis and strategy. If you're not in it like that, it's kind of the challenge of, quarterly driven boards, but that's a whole other...
We have those as well, I'm afraid, because it's all about the numbers.
Certainly.
But for us as a philosophy for our research, we try to look beyond just the immediate horizon. We have a piece of work that we do every year, which is called Predictions, which is basically a brand for thought leadership. And we take all the research we've done in the previous 12 months and kind of strike it forward for a period of time, normally 2 or 3 years, sometimes a little bit longer. And we bring all of our customers together and all of the people who want to hear what we've got to say, either online or there's an invite-only in-person event. Normally happens in October. It will happen in October this year, and then the in-person event happens normally in November. And we talk about what that is, and we bring some of our customers in to tell us what they think about that. It's a really virtuous set of relationships which allows us to build that thought leadership and to reaffirm it or to challenge it in a variety of ways.
Yeah, totally. The challenging it and the looking at it for yourself and into the future is very important.
Exactly.
So I wouldn't mind taking you back a bit into the past, because I think it's interesting for people to also hear about Shaun the person and what got you to where you are now. Yeah. So what were you going to be when you were a teenager, may I ask? Did you have any aspirations then? What was I going to be when I was a teenager? It's so long ago, Ian. I'm not sure I can quite remember. I don't think I had a burning ambition. I loved rugby. I've always loved rugby. I'm 6'2" now and 110 kilos, so I'm a unit now. But when I was younger, I was quite small. Until I was 16, I was about 5'6", 5'7", and then I sprouted up. And suddenly I became a rugby player who could make an impact rather than a rugby player avoiding impact. And I think that made a big difference. So I think if you'd asked me then, although I was never good enough by a lot, my son is 18 now and he's a better player than I was at 30, to be honest with you. I would have liked to have been a rugby player, but that never really grabbed me. But I realized that technology was interesting. I don't know if it grabbed me in the way, because I'm not an engineer, I'm not a scientist, but I know it was interesting. I knew it was changing. I knew there was something going on. And that spark of seeing a mobile phone in a car for the first time with a colleague, a friend of mine actually, who came back from a new job with a car phone in the center console, for those of you who can remember this. And he picked it up and said, just make a phone call. I remember thinking,
this is how does this work? This is just, when technology is amazing, it's like magic. That's exactly what it was.
You mentioned an interesting point about you weren't a technologist at the time, but obviously you've learned it. So have you used any of your educational background?
Well, I did in my first degree in Manchester, I did what was effectively economics and politics. They called it combined studies, but it was economics and politics. And I think by the time I came out of university, I probably was thinking about something along those lines, either economics or perhaps even a little bit of politics. I'm still very keen on politics now. I think I understood that wasn't going to give me what I wanted more broadly in my life. And I think that I felt I wanted to go in those days, get on some kind of graduate scheme, which I was able to do with a company in the north. I worked there for 4 years. I think I got my numbers right there, and then got to Motorola. And I think it was as I started to see some of those technologies emerge in the late 1980s, I thought to myself, okay, this could be interesting. There was that click moment where I saw it in the car, and then the opportunity to join Motorola in 1988.
Right. And that's interesting as you made that segue, I think myself as well. I mean, I actually have a business background, and then, like technology, and it's good to come from a slightly different background where you can then apply your knowledge.
I think doing the MBA helped immensely, not because it gave me any answers. I remember thinking about this a lot at the time. The MBA helped me to know what questions to ask, not necessarily all the answers to have. And I think that helped me to have some transferable skills beyond just being, an account manager or a marketeer, which is largely the road I was going to be going down. And I think that helped me immensely to have a bit more confidence in those broader, close adjacent markets. So perhaps that was a little bit of it as well.
Yeah, it's all about asking the right questions, right?
It absolutely is.
It really is. I think that's it doesn't matter what you're doing. You don't have to have all the answers, but start asking some questions, and the better those questions are.
or have a group of men and women around you who are, I always try and find people who are better than me, and that's not hard, but find people who are better than me in what they do and can do things better than me when they do them. And I hope that's a philosophy I've been able to keep in place. And go forward in doing that. But it's not always that easy. It's not always that easy to find those people who want to come into your set of values, your culture, and make the things you want to do in the areas you want to do it. But I hope we've done some of that. I hope so.
Well, managing people is the hardest part of work, right? Or at least for me it is. And is there something that you do to relax when you're not working?
Yeah, we started late with our family, so I'm very lucky. I like my kids, and I like being with them. So they're both at university now, and we spend quite a lot of time, probably more than they like it with them at university, if I'm really honest with you. So I do that probably a little more than I should do with them. I still watch a lot of sport, more than perhaps I should. I listen to a lot of music, and we'll come on to that probably later on. A lot of music. I really enjoy music, and that's probably one of the things that if you ask people around me, what is the thing that Shaun would be doing, it's probably listening to some sort of music, and I'm fairly eclectic in my taste these days. So that's something I like doing. I think that other than that, I don't really have I think as all people who get very involved in their businesses, they become almost driven by them a little bit in terms of, I want to do this. And that's probably where it lands with me a little bit too.
Yeah.
And then if we go back in time, obviously before time, but it could be, of course, someone who's alive today as well. Have you got any particular historical figure that you wouldn't mind spending an hour, to having a chat with? Have you got someone you either look up to or just curious as to what the hell they were doing at the time?
This is probably going to be when you do all your podcasts, I suspect this will be the oddest answer you get.
Okay.
There's a very famous economist called John Maynard Keynes.
Oh, yeah.
Which people will know the name of because they'll have known of Keynesian economics, particularly during the 2008-2010. He was a fascinating polymath. He was a brilliant mathematician, clearly a brilliant economist, which is one and the same thing these days, I think. He reorganized the world financial system in conjunction with others, but it was largely his ideas. He desperately tried to organize the payments and the debt that Europe and particularly the UK owed to the United States after the Second World War. I think he was bankrupt twice and made a fortune as a result of that through speculation and particularly art. He was married to a Russian ballerina. He was part of the...
This guy's phenomenal.
Oh, it's...
I want to meet him.
It was an amazing polymath. He was part of a group that came out of Cambridge University called the Apostles, who were immensely influential in the tastes the art and the economics that came out of Cambridge in the 1930s or 1920s and early 20s. Eventually, many of them became the Bloomsbury Group in North London or in Central London. And if you study history, you'll know most of the names in that. And then I think he also, not only did he do things on an international scale, he was an astonishing public speaker. When he spoke, literally leaders of the world listened. So when he was working out how to create the gold standard and the International Bank and not the United Nations, but what became the United Nations, which he was very important in understanding what that could be and how it would work. He understood how to do that and to build those things out there. And he was able to speak to prime ministers and leaders in a way that engaged them and made them listen, even though he had a very high-pitched voice. He isn't somebody, if you met him in the street, you wouldn't know. He was very tall, he was very slim. And all of those things mean that I think he would be a fascinating person to listen to about what he had been through, both culturally. He bought, for King's College, Cambridge, he bought works of art at the time in the 1920s and 30s from Picasso and Matisse and Monet and others, Renoir, when they were relatively inexpensive, which is one of the reasons why King's College, Cambridge is now one of the richest colleges in the world. So all those things would be, he would be endlessly fascinating to listen to, no matter what you wanted to do in life. So John Maynard Keynes would be my choice.
I think that's a
thank
great
you very
answer.
much for that.
Yeah.
So that makes it a challenging segue, but I will try it. But I'm sure you're aware of it. We are distressed situations, and I'm sure you've also heard of desert island discs. So this is where this sort of question came from: you're stranded on an island, and is there one piece of technology you'd want to have with you? By the way, we are excluding mobile phones by definition, if you can imagine.
You can't be stranded if you have a mobile phone in your pocket.
And why?
No, I think for me it would be a radio. We are beyond lucky in the United Kingdom to have the BBC. I will defend it to my dying breath. I think it has its ups and downs, but I will defend it to my dying breath. And what it delivers in terms of breadth and depth and analysis and art and culture, not just the BBC, but we have such a vibrant culture. Speech radio, to me, if it's balanced and interesting, even if it's unbalanced and disinteresting, it's still better than most other things. And the uncommon variety you get on radio, I think, is almost unparalleled. And it would be a radio.
So do you listen to radio quite a lot?
I listen to radio
now?
more than anything else, I think. In terms of listening to input, I mean, probably
Yes.
not more than music, but I choose music. It's a different kind of thing.
Yes. Okay. That's very interesting indeed.
Gosh, we've covered a lot of stuff. Childhood. Were you like a science fiction nut when you were a teenager? Did you like technology?
No, I think it was a little different for me. So somebody said to me, did you like Marvel comics and DC comics? I didn't like them because they were Marvel and DC. When I grew up in a very Irish household, even though I was brought up in the United Kingdom. And it was a very happy childhood, by the way. And we didn't have anything, but it was happy.
That's wonderful.
And because we came with immigrant parents, my parents turned up in the UK with, I think, £25 between them, and that was it. That's great.
And
we were
great.
okay. This country looked after them, and we were good. But coming from an Irish background, particularly of my parents' vintage, America is mythical. North America is a mythical place because you either came east to the UK and perhaps beyond, or you went west to America. And the kind of individuals who went west to America and came home were mythical figures. They were Game of Thrones figures coming back from this land of plenty. Ireland was still a pretty struggling country until the early 80s. It's not the country it is today. It was largely an agrarian economy. It was a happy place, but a poor place relative to the rest of Europe. And I think that North America was seen as literally the golden land, the place to go. And so that kind of translated itself to us as children of immigrants into a very mythical place. So the sky was always bluer, the people were always healthier, the cars were always bigger, the food was cheaper, all of that. But by the way, I say mythical because I suspect none of this is true.
Wow.
But the point is, the way it was described to us was so astonishingly different and people like things like Marvel comics and DC comics and skateboarding and surfing were just unimaginably exotic. Living in the middle of Birmingham, and sun, just sun.
Yes, true. That's true.
This is a very, very real thing for anybody living in Ireland or the UK in general, right?
Very real.
Although I will say we do have far too big cars and far too cheap food. And I don't think that makes us any more healthy. And certainly our health system is failing us. But Marvel Comics did really make a lot of technology very cool. I mean, we can go back to different films. Did you have a piece of tech that you think has come out of science fiction that's sort of in our world today that's really cool?
The only answer I will give you for that is smartphones. I'll take that back a step. Mobile telephony. I remember the first time I went to Hong Kong and had a phone in my briefcase, traveling in a taxi in from the airport, and I got a phone call from the UK. And I remember thinking to myself, how the heck does this work? Because this is deeply impressive. And go back to what I said earlier, it's like magic. It is like magic. And I think phones first, but smartphones particularly, I think have driven our industry and the levels of connectivity to a level of involvement in our societies, which I think was probably unimaginable less than 15 years ago. I think I'd include fiber broadband and broadband in that as well in the last 10 or 12 years. But I think smartphones, particularly smartphones, phones before that for other reasons, smartphones themselves, the building of the app ecology, and maybe apps could be one of those technologies as well. Mm-hmm. And I think 4G together, that kind of mix, that recipe, I think was certainly unprecedented even in our industry. And the way that we've moved on in that is anybody who told you they knew it was going to happen but just isn't telling the truth.
I tend to agree with you on that. And I must admit the deeper I delve into the telco and mobile technology, the more of a wonder that it works at all. I mean, they're so complicated and so many bits need to be aligned at the right time. But when we say time, it's and then we're talking about it's taking a millisecond or 2 milliseconds. I mean, it is mind-boggling the performances that we're now expecting from the networks to achieve certain things. So I think it's a very good answer on that one.
I think when you do this later with others, I will be surprised if many say many other things, because nothing's had quite that profound impact on everyone's lives. And hopefully will do for those who haven't yet had quite the experience of it, because there's still a lot of unconnected out there.
Certainly.
GSMA said 2 billion, I think.
Yeah.
So we still have to help them to experience that and make their lives better because of it. But still, you can only do it as soon as you can do it. You can't do everything straight away.
Well, and it's the great human equalizer, so we have to. And certainly our next guest, actually, Mia Thompson with the Unconnected, they are using a variety of, like you're saying, mobile technologies, to address these, again, still disconnected people out there, and there are billions of them. But this is why I think mobile technology and where Ian's sort of inspiration for this podcast came from is just such the change maker. Mobile telephony, like you're saying, it's the star of it all, right? Because it's enabled all of this innovation. And it's why it's so valuable to continue to look for how it's really being taken and continuing to do that. But, we are still running through a lot of resources, and building these networks takes a lot of time, and we've got naysayers saying all this stuff about climate change and our planet lasting. If you were given the opportunity to colonize Mars but could never come back here, knowing what we know, would you go to Mars?
No. Absolutely would not. I know we could start again. But I think President, he's got to say this, obviously. But when President Obama was asked exactly that question, he said, when is the best time to live? He's got to say now because that's his time.
Right.
But it is right now. You only have to go back 100 years, and we don't have reliable anesthesia. So, it's go back another 100 years, we don't have reliable antibiotics.
Right, penicillin, right.
That's literally, our stuff isn't life and death. It could be. I can understand when you talk to Mia, I suspect some of the things she'll talk about will be, certainly, if we give people smartphones, they will literally live longer. That I can imagine that conversation. But we're not going to, antibiotics and anesthesia, I think, are a bit more important in the history of the world than smartphones. It doesn't mean to say that smartphones aren't valuable.
So do you think that we could see a future where AI would push you off of the planet towards Mars? Or is all of that sort of stuff just AI hype? The machines aren't ever going to take over?
Well, okay. Now we're getting into a deeper conversation. I think the AI genie is out of the bottle.
Certainly.
So whatever we think about it, I think it's done. It's the journey, the direction of travel is done. I think there's two very fundamental issues that we have to do more quickly than perhaps we've done anything else before as societies. And this won't be a popular one, this first one, by the way. I think we have to get our regulation sorted out around it, both in terms of what it is being used for, what the sanctions are when it isn't used for our society's goals, whatever those may be, and how we can control and guide it to deliver a set of outcomes which will make our lives better. And by the way, that may not be the same for every single country. It might be the same for regions, but it might not be the same for every different country. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is the inclusion of AI will make things better. Now, it just will. It'll make things quicker, faster, cheaper, better as an experience, because they already are. If you're using an early version, some of the beta versions of Copilot, as some of our people are, they will tell you that once you learn how to use it properly, it saves them hours and things. So it's about understanding. We're in the very, very early days of that. A year ago, some of the things you see being done now literally couldn't even be conceived of doing, and now we're using them every day to create very minor things like slide decks or images or whatever it might be. The time that it'll pick a lot of pace up, I think, in terms of that overview and control. And neither of those are very good words for the internet. The internet don't like overview and control, whether they're big or small. It's just not built on that.
Right.
Although it has to fall into line with what our society's values are in order to meet the demands that we want of them. And that's not going to be easy, by the way. Then I think that it could be something very, very exciting. And I think I'm probably alongside, as I hope I would be, Nadella and Zuckerberg and the big leaders out there. Bezos to an extent, although he's a little bit quieter about it, who says that AI could be as important over the next 10 years as the internet has been in the last 10 years. I think that's probably true, if I'm honest with you. However, we have to take a little bit more control of it. And we're not good at getting legislation and regulation in place in time for technology because it moves so quickly. And we've never had a technology that moves as quickly as AI.
Yeah.
So that expands, improves, delivers, and expands again and improves and delivers. We've never seen anything like that before. And I think the regulators are going to struggle very much to do this. And I would say this, to their credit, the European Union regulators have a marvelous track record in this regulation and understanding what needs to be done. I remember when GDPR was first muted, being in America, talking to people who would be impacted by it, telling us it will never happen. And
right.
And you know, even regulators were skeptical of what GDPR could be. Whatever you think of GDPR, the fact is that pretty much it's a model for the rest of the world regulation in that part of personal protection and security on the internet.
Right.
I think we've got to do something similar with AI. At the moment, the Europeans seem to be at the forefront of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you're right. GDPR is a good building block on which it all sort of relates certainly around personal data. But, you know, we do then come to the question, as you say, the modeling. And also, I think regulators tend to always work retrospectively.
They do.
They're always behind the curve rather than having, by definition, the type of people that do regulation are not necessarily the big, inventors and thinkers that, don't end up in that sort of job. But yeah, I think, it's going to be exciting. But as you say, I think there needs to be some sort of guide rails put in place, if you want to use that term, to make sure that it doesn't come unhinged.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Given the presence of the Chinese room in AI today, really, couldn't we sort of control it in advance from an inputting? So what you can't continue to feed the hallucination process of the AI if you can't, X, Y, and Z, because it is also about what it's being taught, which,
yes.
Regulating, ethics of individual humans and what they teach the AI is you're just.
I think regulation isn't just about control of the industry. It's also about control of what the attitude of the industry is to various bits. So
Yeah.
I think balance, diversity, inclusion, I think are very, very important in AI because it represents a lot of what the people who are developing it, whoever she or she is developing it, will naturally have some of those unconscious biases that I think will naturally then fall into the AI. We have to be very careful about that. There's been a lot of talk about that, a lot of work being done on that, I think.
Yeah.
So that's very important. So I think that the other thing is that I think the geopolitics kind of is overarching the whole of this conversation.
Yeah.
Everything we talk about will decide what the future of our technological world and maybe our political world will look like over the next few years, depending on what administrations come into those big centers of control over the next 12 or 15 months. And I think that we're going to have to think about, rather sadly, I think I might even use the word catastrophically, instead of having the world that we have had in the last 10 years, where the whole world meets the same set of specifications broadly and the same set of rules broadly to meet a technology like, let's say, 5G.
Okay.
AI is slightly different. I do fear for the next level of development, we just can't come to a conclusion on the fact that there'll be one central point of technology specification, let's say in 5G, and possibly in 6G, in 6G, not 5G, which will allow us to all, quote unquote, compete for it together. I have a genuine fear now, having spent quite a lot of time in the Far East and the Southeast Asian markets in the last 12 months. And I hope I'm wrong. I deeply, deeply hope I'm wrong, that we start to see two levels of that technology coming out. So an Eastern version, in the biggest sense of the word, and a Western version. I really hope I'm wrong about that.
I think from the judging that's been done and the judging that I've been doing, you do notice certain categories that just on scale, if you like, and having, billions of people to work with and not have to worry about varying, contrasting regulators. There's only one regulator in a territory. They've been able to move forward with AI and also machine learning and other things, where we in Europe are still, I wouldn't say scratching our heads, but at least, still trying to work out what's the best way forward.
I'm not sure Europe, as much as the EU and national governments quite rightly are trying to find a way to make us relevant, as in the European market relevant. I think we're already beyond that. Again, it's very depressing. I'm doing this in quite a low voice because I'm very depressed about it. If you go back 12 or 15 years, we had Europe, that is, had the biggest handset supplier, we had the biggest network supplier, and we had close to the biggest operator.
True.
You go forward 15 years, and it's we don't dominate anything. And as a region, and that's really unsettling given the level of consumption we have. But if you look at the industry that we're in, it's a game of scale.
Right.
It's a game of scale. And if I'm right about that, and I'm pretty sure nobody's going to argue about that, then honestly, it's hard to see how China doesn't come out on top. It's because the North Americans have a immense amount of influence in the North American market, which is very, very, very influential and valuable. They have a very important foothold in Northwest and Central Europe. And after that, I'm struggling.
Yeah.
Whereas if you look at China just on its own, as you quite rightly point out, Ian, just every time we see the numbers for 5G from the Chinese market, even if I discount it by 10% for shipments and stock and all that kind of stuff, I'm being generous now.
Right.
It's still enormous. It's just enormous. And you can't imagine that AI isn't equally important in their building blocks of their long-term plan to become one of the dominant economic forces in the world over the next 25 years. I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong. I've got no political judgment on this whatsoever.
Right.
It just is.
Well, as I say, you're observer. You're judging work. You're an observer, right? At the end of the day, and seeing what's happening and the rest of it. So it's beyond AI, or is AI the thing that you think will change your life for the next 10 years, the biggest thing, or do you have something else in mind, technology-wise, which you'd like to see in the future?
I think there's two things that I'm keeping an eye on, and we as a business kind of vaguely keeping an eye on. AI, there isn't a part of our business that doesn't have a significant AI stream in it, not one. And everything from wearables on your wrist to 5G networks to satellites. It literally, at every part, there is an element and a play that AI has in that to a greater or lesser extent.
Right, the genie's
So
out.
AI is it's a profound technology.
It's an enabler, I guess. It's fundamentally there across.
It'll become a feature in the within 2 or 3 years. It'll just be a feature. We won't even talk about AI specifically. We'll talk about the applications and so on.
Yes,
it's by the way, this is my thoughts, and to be fair, it's informed by some of the work that the broader team is doing at CCS Insight.
And in anticipation for the MWC, I think one of the analysts was saying there, where I will help us personally is getting stuff done. Instead of you having to learn an application, you just ask the application, give me I need this result, if you like. So that will make us more efficient and effective in that way. I thought that was quite a good way of describing that. And so if we move on to the green world, I mean, is there anything from a sustainability innovation perspective that you think is promising that will help us with a greener planet?
That's what I was just going to ask about the scaling, right? In China, with AI finding the new batteries and all of this potential of things getting smaller and lasting much longer, is there potentially, especially as, conscious consumerism and regulatory impacts continue to grow, is there point where where scale is no longer really a thing? It's about how long you can build something to last again.
There's no question in my mind that there will come a point as we start to roll this technology out in which we start to ask questions of it from a sustainable viewpoint, much more aggressively than we are right now. And 5G and AI are pretty big consumers of stuff. Let's say it's electricity or it's whatever it is for the time being.
Right.
I don't think anybody would deny that that's true. What we have to do, and that was my second point, which is about sustainability, which is, are we going to be able to do this in a way that we respond to the responsibilities that we have in understanding that we have to drive the technological edge of our market forward, that there is a cost at every level that we have to take on board. I suspect that depending on how overwhelming the geopolitical goals become, we have to be careful about that one.
Absolutely.
Then it may be that sadly, we may forego some of that in the short term. I think in the medium term, we've got no choice. We have to address it. And there is no question that when we talk to the big players in this marketplace, providing networks and employing networks, it is high in their minds about how they can do it better. But their curve of success in sustainability, while successful, is probably not traveling as fast as it probably needs to be right now. But they are trying very hard to do it much quicker than they can at the moment. And I don't know what the answer. Technologically, if we're going to roll out networks at the pace and AI at the pace that we are, there is a cost. There has to be a cost. And this is probably one of the worst of the costs, or the most expensive of the costs, is a better way of putting it.
So do you think that 6G should be a soft upgrade version, which is what some people are suggesting, whether others, of course, are seeing it as a hardware upgrade? What would you like to see? Because one, of course, is more sustainable than the other, right? Obviously, by definition.
Well, I think that I've yet to be convinced of anything from somebody who said to me what 6G will actually be for. So in other words, what is it that 5G is, or by that point, 5G advanced is not? Right. What can it give us that's more than that? And by the way, we should also say that in the work that we do, we're privileged enough to be able to see a little bit inside behind the curtains and see a few things. Most people that we talk to are saying you won't see commercial 6G, no matter what people are saying at MWC in 2 weeks' time, till 2030. You just won't see it. Of course, Ericsson and Nokia and Huawei and ZTE and others, Samsung, I guess, a little bit too, will be saying that they want to drive it a little bit harder and a little earlier than they have done for 5G, which I think is very reckless, by the way, because they've got businesses to run. I'm not blaming them. I can see what they're trying to do. So I think that 6G for me is still a very, very grey game. We're in the battle for specifications at the moment. That started in Dubai before Christmas at WRC. Okay. That was very, very lively by all accounts. I mean, I don't mean nobody ever shouts in this marketplace. When I say lively, I mean the debate was lively about what it should be, and that's usually a very good starting point for how we see it going forward. But sensing seems to be a very high priority in there. Some of the rollout of some of it could, I think, conceivably done by software upgrades, maybe the majority of it by software upgrades, and some of the virtualization of the network allows you to do just stuff better rather than going into the detail of it. I think the combination of cloud, AI, IoT, whatever 6G becomes even more powerful than it is right now. And I think almost that kind of team game of 5G will become just the way you do 6G. It just becomes that, to the point where at CCS Insight we've said that we anticipate that you could see potentially groupings of companies bidding for spectrum. So, it wouldn't just be Vodafone, or it wouldn't be Deutsche, it wouldn't be Verizon or whoever it is. It would be Verizon and AWS.
Like the submarine cable groups.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, but you do have, that's that kind of access. And really, I think you're right about 2030, and maybe they'll try to push it harder to 2026. But again, other than China, who's using all of their 5G network currently? And even China's not, right? It's a big circle of...
I think philosophically, if you look at what 5G is, let's take a step back. That some of the issues with 5G is that we can't convince a consumer to pay more for the service. Cool. And yet the operators are having to invest billions of dollars in the network. So for a consumer, it's difficult to convince them that fast Facebook or fast YouTube is a thing, because we haven't yet seen a slew of applications arrive on which we depend solely on the throughput of 5G. There are some very specific cases where I can see high value, and largely those are enterprise, and we'll come back to that in a second. So it's very difficult to see how the ROI works. But I think much more importantly, for me anyway, is that we made such a good job of 4G across the globe that the next step was always going to be a really tough step. Because frankly, for everything I'm doing at the moment, me being consumer, I'm not talking about me in my work, as a consumer, honestly, 4G is pretty darn good when it's working. 4.5G or that kind of thing is pretty darn good. So that leap to 5G isn't enough to convince me that I want to pay an extra $10 a month, because it's not giving me $10 worth of value more than I'm getting right now. So the way that they're selling it is they're selling it by giving you better tariffs, which is more for more effectively. And it's a tariffing, not a technology development, which actually might be better in the long run.
Certainly, the bundling sort of aspect and your streaming service and all of those sorts of techniques fall under that kind of pricing model that they're trying to move to, which I agree to an extent. And, then you can maybe begin to layer in the wholesale advertising where, the consumer removes themselves as the payee of the entire situation, and the model can flip entirely. Quick question before we take a break. Are you Apple or Android?
Android.
Hey.
Nah, I have to be careful because my job is to be neutral.
Right.
So I have to be honest and say I do use an iPhone as well, but my main number is in Android. But I have lots of phones because I go back to what I said. We get to use lots of different technologies basically for nothing. I never take that for granted. So when people give me phones or give me watches or give me technology to use, I will always do them courtesy of using it, and I will always do the courtesy of feeding back on it. So I have got an iPhone that I use as well, to be clear, but my main number is an Android.
Well, thank you very much for your insights for this first part. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to our new podcast. If you have any feedback from today's episode or know of any stories to be told involving digital technology in telecoms doing good, then please do let us know via email, feedback@digiteltalk.com. Also, feel free to send us a message on LinkedIn. It would be great to hear from you.
Before we go, if you've enjoyed today's episode and would like to support the podcast, then don't forget to give us a follow and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Also, if you'd like to leave us a review or share it with your colleagues, it really helps us on the channel.
I hope you can tune in to our next episode where we'll talk more to Shaun about the GloMo Awards and how they make a difference.
Thanks so much for being a part of our audience today, and hopefully you'll join us next time.
That's all we've got time for, so it's goodbye from me.
And that's goodbye from him.
Bye
for now.